Migrant workers on Taiwanese fishing boats are subject to punishing working conditions. Human rights groups are sounding the alarm.
Fishmandis kita itu benar-benar terganggu. Fisik, mental, dan spiritual kita itu merasa goncang banget.
New Defense Minister Wellington Koo addresses the legislature for the first time as Taiwan is waiting on a backlog of U.S. weapon deliveries worth billions of dollars. Russian President Vladimir Putin says he may sell missiles to countries that can strike targets in the West in retaliation for U.S. weapons striking Russia.
И в конечном итоге, если мы видим, что эти страны втягиваются в войну против нас, а это и есть их прямое участие в войне против Российской Федерации.
Plus, Taiwan's outlying Green Island is searching for ways to mitigate over-tourism without harming the island economy that depends on it. Welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Leslie Liao. Thanks for joining us. Rights groups say Taiwan isn't doing enough to stop the abuse of migrant workers on long-haul fishing boats. The issue is a blot on the country's otherwise relatively strong human rights record, with reports of punishing work hours as well as verbal and physical abuse at sea. John Van Trieste reports.
It's year 2 of a 4-year plan to clean up abuses in Taiwan's deep-sea fishing fleet. Mistreatment of the Southeast Asian migrant workers that keep the fleet running has attracted international attention and threats of sanctions from the U.S. and EU. But while Taiwan's plan addresses issues like wages, NGOs say major questions remain. One is whether the plan does enough to prevent forced labor.
法规仍然允许渔船在海上停留高达10个月的时间哦。相对来讲，国际劳工组织已经把3个月作为强迫劳动的一个警讯。
Restricted internet access for fishers is another issue. Just 98 ships, 10% of Taiwan's distant water fleet, have onboard Wi-Fi. And rights groups say the recommended allowance of 3 hours access per day is not enough. A lack of access to the outside world is something fishers themselves say takes a serious toll on them.
Karena pengalaman selama ini kan, saya pernah juga sampai lebih 10 bulan. Kita juga kadang kalau nggak ada komunikasi itu, fishmandis kita itu benar-benar terganggu. Fisik, mental, dan spiritual kita itu merasa goncang banget.
And then there are concerns about the way checks on ships are outsourced to third parties. NGOs worry ship owners could have their own employees do inspections and have them falsify their findings.
所以这个就是球员兼裁判，这个就是剥削产业链。
Taiwan's fisheries agency says it's grateful for any constructive criticism, but it also stands by what it says its action plan has achieved over the last 2 years. That includes rules about living conditions that it says its agents enforce not just in Taiwan, but in ports overseas.
我们当初就调整提高薪水，从450块美金1个月提高到550块美金。那目前也在持续检讨怎么样再去提升他们的相关待遇。那在整个那个工作时间的部分，因为过去蛮多人批评在台湾的远洋渔船工作时间都是超过正常的工作时间，所以我们要求在船上你必须建立你的工时登记。
But NGOs say they will keep the pressure on the government to ensure Taiwanese fishing operators respect the rights of their crew members. Chris Ma and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's newly appointed defense minister has outlined to lawmakers how he plans to secure Taiwan's defenses. Wellington Koo pointed to China as the country's biggest threat. He says the military is focused on getting more weapons from the U.S. and further reforming its training. In his first address to the legislature as defense minister, Koo also said increased cooperation with the U.S. can help add to deterrence.
我们所要的当然还是强化我们的自我防卫的能力，加入这个整个美国印太战略，它所谓的形成一个有效嚇阻里面的一环。
Taiwan has been prioritizing drone manufacturing as part of its defense strategy. But how effective is it? To find out more, Jaime Ocon spoke to Eric Gomez of the Cato Institute in Washington, D.C.
This group of U.S. defense contractors that are in Taiwan, meeting with the president and domestic defense companies here in Taiwan, it looks like they're looking to advance Taiwan's drone capabilities. How significant are drones to Taiwan's overall defense capability?
Well, for asymmetric defense, drones are pretty fantastic. Unmanned systems are excellent capabilities for an asymmetric defense strategy, especially for a country like Taiwan that has difficulty with personnel level. And I think Taiwan needs more drones of all ranges, of all types. And I know that the Taiwanese domestic defense industry has been working hard in recent years to try and increase their number of drones. And again, the Ukraine war shows like you expend a lot of these in a conflict. So figuring out what you want to produce and starting to produce in scale now is a really good idea for Taiwan across the board.
Now, aside from advancing Taiwan's drone capabilities, Taiwan is also still waiting on billions of dollars of U.S. weapons that haven't arrived to Taiwan yet. What's the status on those weapons, and why is it taking so long?
The sort of good news, bad news maybe for Taiwan is about 10 billion of this stuff is 2 arms sales. I believe it goes up to about 11 billion for 3 arms sales. The HIMARS, the Abrams tanks, and F-16s. By the end of 2026, assuming there are no new delays, those 3 packages should be delivered in full. And so this backlog problem just on those gets cut by more than half by 2026, assuming there's no new big arms sales announced. So the first issue is trying to find this. The second issue is, well, why does it exist? And I can't give you a simple answer. Unless we have more information, it's really hard to know where the problem is coming from. But I think there are 3 potential candidates. There's the US government, the Taiwanese government, and the US defense industry. The US government might be a problem with delays depending on how long it takes them to get certain things done bureaucratically on their end. Ditto for the Taiwanese.
And in terms of urgency, there's this famous Davidson window of 2027 when China could be able to conduct an attack, but is not saying that it will conduct an attack. In the sense of urgency for Taiwan getting these weapons, how significant is it that it's rushing or improving its own domestic industry?
Well, a lot of it depends on, the assessment of that window. And for what it's worth, I don't buy the Davidson window. I don't think that Xi Jinping has a date in mind. I don't think the PLA has a date in mind. Yes, they have been practicing these sort of operations around Taiwan, but they're in the midst. They're about 10 years into a big, defense reform effort. So I think the good news for Taiwan is that there is time, right?
That was Eric Gomez, a security analyst from the Cato Institute, speaking with Jaime Okan. A U.S. bomber has dropped a precision-guided bomb over the Korean Peninsula as part of joint drills with South Korea. It's the first such drills in 7 years. It came a day after Seoul suspended its 2018 pact with Pyongyang aimed at easing tensions and resumed all military activities along the border between North and South Korea. Seoul said the drills showed the U.S.'s commitment. Tensions are rising after North Korea launched hundreds of balloons carrying trash into the south over the past week. Russian President Vladimir Putin has made fresh threats against the West in a rare press conference with international reporters. Chris Gordon looks at whether this represents a change in the more than 2-year-long war in Ukraine.
In St. Petersburg, Russia, a rare sight. Russian President Vladimir Putin takes questions from international media for more than 3 hours. Front of mind is the recent decision by the United States to allow Ukraine to use U.S.-made weapons to attack targets in Russia. Putin says if this continues, he may sell similar weapons to countries within striking distance of the West.
И в конечном итоге, если мы видим, что эти страны втягиваются в войну против нас, а это и есть их прямое участие в войне против Российской Федерации, то мы оставляем за собой право действовать аналогичным образом.
The Ukrainian request to use U.S. weapons in Russian cross-border attacks comes after it suffered major setbacks from a Russian offensive in the northeast of the country. Putin's threat to sell missiles that can strike Western countries could be seen as a major escalation against the West.
It's in one way an escalation and in some ways not. So the weapons that Russia has in Belarus and in the Russian region of Kaliningrad already provide range to cover Poland, Germany, Sweden, Finland, and the Baltic states. And it is difficult to envision any sales to other European countries outside of NATO that would provide them with any further benefits.
During the meeting, Putin also warned the West yet again that the use of nuclear weapons remains on the table. Putin has made similar statements since the invasion of Ukraine began in 2022. But analysts say a Russian nuclear attack would come with consequences.
Who does Russia attack? Do they use nuclear weapons against a non-nuclear armed Ukraine? Because there would be repercussions for that. The United States and NATO would not let that go unanswered, almost certainly.
As governments outside of the war zone continue to struggle with how much to involve themselves, Ukraine and Russia are both trying to find enough soldiers to fight after more than 2 years of war. Ukraine is running out of fresh recruits and has recently turned to its prisons to find fighters, a tactic Russia has been using from the start. The war has gone on for more than 2 years now, but anyone looking for a light at the end of the tunnel won't find it in Putin's threat to the West. Patrick Chun and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
Palau's president says he expects China to interfere in his country's upcoming elections over its recognition of Taiwan.
Well, I think in every election, the Chinese are always involved. One of the things that we know is that it's the president who ultimately decides who you have diplomatic relations with. And so obviously they know where my stance is. So I guess I would be the enemy, right? and so you would probably want to remove me and put somebody else in that would be more friendly.
Palau has blamed China for a recent cyber attack in which thousands of confidential documents were stolen. According to the New York Times, many of them contained details of Palau's relationship with Taiwan. Palau is one of only 12 countries with official diplomatic ties with Taipei. China has denied it was behind the hack. The world got a scorching reality check from the European Union's climate service, with May declared the hottest ever. There have now been 12 straight months of smashed temperature records. Sandy Chi reports.
As scorching heat waves and long droughts plague the globe, it's now been confirmed. Last month was the hottest May on record, completing a string of 12 record-breaking months. According to EU Climate Service Copernicus, the Earth's average surface temperature reached 15.9 degrees Celsius last month, 1.52 degrees higher than the May average before industrial times. The stark findings prompted UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres to call for urgent action.
We cannot accept a future where the rich are protected in air-conditioned bubbles while the rest of humanity is lashed by lethal weather in unlivable lands. We must safeguard people and economies.
Guterres called for slashed emissions, clamping down on fossil fuel industry and the boosting of climate finance over the next 18 months to reverse the impact of global warming. It comes after a year of deadly disasters that have claimed thousands of lives. Brutal heat waves in Asia shriveled crops, forced schools to close, and made everyday life a misery for millions of others. Africa experienced long-lasting droughts, while communities across the world were devastated by floods. Scientists say these events were worsened by global warming, which is exacerbated by the burning of fossil fuels. Most governments have pledged to gradually reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but few are doing at the speed scientists say is needed to avert the devastation. And the future is not looking bright. A separate report from the UN's World Meteorological Organization, or WMO, is predicting an 80% chance the next 5 years will see the average global temperature surpass 1.5 degree target, laid out in the landmark 2015 Paris Agreement.
Is the stark reality that we risk trillions of dollars in economic losses, millions of lives upended, and destruction of fragile and precious ecosystems and the biodiversity that exists there. What is clear is that the Paris Agreement target of 1.5 degrees C is hanging on a thread. It's not yet dead, but it's hanging by a thread.
The WMO also says it's highly likely one of the next 5 years will be 2023 as the world's hottest year on record. UN leaders are renewing calls to advance economies meetings at a G20 summit in Brazil next month to take the lead in minimizing the impact of climate change. And while the tally of record-breaking temperatures will eventually end, the overall trend of dangerous heat and climate disasters may not, unless the world leaders heed the call for change. Devon Tai, Rosie Greninger, and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Now we're going to take a quick break, but stay with us because coming up on TaiwanPlus News, a centuries-old Nepali practice of harvesting honeycombs from cliff sides is being threatened by climate change. Locals are struggling to keep it alive.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. For centuries, Himalayan honey hunters scaled steep cliffs to harvest honeycomb. But in recent years, climate change has started to threaten this tradition. Wesley Lewis has the story.
Perched on a precarious cliff face, these villagers in the heart of Nepal's Himalayas are known as honey hunters. Using smoke, they clear away swarming giant honeybees and scale the cliffs with bamboo rope ladders. Then they use long blades to slice off chunks of honeycomb. This unique honey is known as mad honey because it contains intoxicating elements that cause hallucinations. Honey hunting is a centuries-old tradition here, but this year, hunters say they've noticed fewer bees.
भनेर सुरु गर्नु लागो त मय आउँदै आएन यसपालि के भयो न त्यो पानी नभएर नआओ यी रुट ढाल्दिएर नआओ यी पर्दा अलिअलि आथ्यो अहिले साल त 10-12 नै आएन सर के गर्ने होला भन्दै सोचिरा गाउँले सबै सोचिराहा.
Twice a year, local villagers embark on honey hunting expeditions. The custom is significant for the region's indigenous Gurung and Magar communities. It helps them maintain their cultural identity and allows them to pass down ancestral knowledge from generation to generation. Villagers say their ancestors knew how to properly maintain the area's honeybee population and that current conditions aren't ideal.
यहाँ गाई चर्ने ठाउँ यी कस्तो विनाश भइसकेको छ. यहाँ विद्युत के रे हाम्रो मौरी घरमा पनि कति विनाश भइसकेको छ. पहिले बुढापाकाले यत्रो रुख पनि यत्रो सानो रुख पनि काट्नु नदिने थिए. किन भन्दाखेरि त्यो मौरी आउँदैन. के रे रुख छलमा यहाँ भिरको कुनामा रुख हुन्छ रुख वरिपरि चाहिँ काट्नै हुँदैन भन्थे.
Villagers have started to worry that the decline of the honeybee population indicates larger environmental problems. And local scientists have also weighed in. They say unusual weather patterns fueled by climate change are putting stress on bee colonies.
Climate change affecting the Himalayan cliff bee in multiple ways. For example, too much rain, too little rain, erratic and intense rain, long dry spell, heat and cold. All these extreme weather conditions, they put stress on maintaining the strength and the honey stock of the colonies.
Scientists also say the erratic weather has impacted bee pollination. Fewer flowers are producing nectar at the right time, which means honeybees have less to work with.
Similarly, the change in the crop phenology, this means early flowering, late flowering, untimely secretion of nectar, this also affects the honey production of the bees.
Honey hunting is not only a time-honored tradition in this remote region of Nepal, it also allows the hunters to supplement their mostly agricultural income. But as Himalayan bees produce less and less honey year after year, villagers are already grappling with the sting of climate change. Howard Zhang and Wesley Lewis for TaiwanPlus.
Japan's birth rate hit a new low for the 8th straight year in 2023. The decline meant the country's population fell by close to 850,000 last year. Government figures also show fewer people are getting married, while the average age a woman gives birth to her first child has gone up to 31. A senior government official says Japan's depopulation trend is in a critical phase, and the next 6 years will be the last chance to turn things around. American tech giant Nvidia has overtaken Apple as the second most valuable company in the world, behind only Microsoft. Nvidia's share price has surged 147% this year, and its market capitalization reached a record $3 trillion on Wednesday. The leading AI chip designer has taken the limelight at Taiwan's annual tech expo Computex this week, and it's announced a team up with Taiwanese tech manufacturer Foxconn to build a joint facility in the south of the country. Nvidia is also looking to set up headquarters here. After shedding its Alcatraz-like reputation as an island for political prisoners, tens of thousands of visitors now flock to Taiwan's outlying Green Island. While enjoying the economic benefits, locals are struggling to find the delicate balance between protecting the ecosystem and tourism. TaiwanPlus sent a team to find out more.
About 30 kilometers off Taiwan's southeastern coast, Green Island is a popular diving spot thanks to the warm weather brought by the Kuroshio Current and its abundant marine life. Locals have been creating more attractions like artificial reefs and the deepest working mailbox in the world. And 3 artificial reefs shaped like Moai statues have also been installed.
那因为经费不够，所以呢，他目前只放了3座。后续还会继续放。
There are more places to explore on Green Island, including scenic landscapes and cultural landmarks to remember the White Terror era. Since martial law was lifted in 1987, tourism began flourishing here. The number of tourists surged from around 60,000 in 1991 to about 400,000 in 2004. Nowadays, approximately 300,000 people visit the island annually. The influx of tourists has been a boost to the island's economy, but it's also impacted the environment. The island suffers from inadequate infrastructure, which causes problems like trash piling up. According to local media reports, in 2020, there were 71 guest houses, 65 diving shops, and 4,000 scooters on this 16-square-kilometer island. And when factoring in illegal operations, the numbers are even higher. The chair of the local Fishermen's Association is the 8th generation of his family to live on Green Island. His family used to run one of the very first guest houses.
观光刚开始起飞的时候，那时候是，其实我们的软硬体设备是跟不上我们观光发展的速度的。你现在反而是环境资源跟不上我们观光的这个量了。
To protect the local environment, the Transportation Ministry has long proposed limiting the number of daily visitors to the area. However, most islanders oppose that idea, as over 80% of them rely on tourism for their livelihoods.
我们有淡旺季之分，我们旺季虽然游客多，那其实我们淡季就等于我们岛屿的修复期，也是有大概6个月的修复期。所以我觉得总量管制是目前应该不是最急迫的事情。
如果是我们要让它游客自然而然的慢慢变成说量少，然后质高的话，尽量看看怎么样来提供友善的环境，更有价值的一个旅游。
The idea of transforming the tourism industry has caught the imagination of one guest house owner. During the pandemic, a unique hotel opened, standing out from others. Its colors blend with the landscape, and the materials like stone and wood match the environment. Designers also took into account the island's vulnerability to typhoons when building the facilities.
因为绿岛有一个很漂亮的海，所以我们不希望用墙壁把它全部挡住。接着我们做了一个非常漂亮的防撞门，它其实刚好也非常符合就是绿岛吧，就是用木头的部分。
The colorful chairs in the dining area are inspired by the island's coral reefs. All in all, the hotel cost more than $6 million to build. The hotel manager says the owner was willing to invest that much, even if they take a loss.
它其实会有点像是抛砖引玉吧，对， 就是希望绿岛的旅游观光可以再更提升一点点。
To help visitors learn more about the area, the hotel uses local ingredients like tuna paste, seaweed, and roselle in its food and drinks. The tuna paste, developed just last year, uses local recipe crafted from yellowfin tuna caught with the island's traditional fishing methods.
这是我们绿岛一本钓的黄鳍尾鱼。
The traditional fishing method known as ipanzuri dates back to the Japanese colonial period. Skilled fishermen use a single line to catch tuna one by one, reducing the risk of overfishing. And local fishers have combined their traditional fishing practices and tourism.
观光跟我们的渔业做一个结合起来，就摩艾象的下水典礼跟我们一本钓的渔法的这个活动比赛活动，观光客多的时候，我们的旺季，那我们的鱼销得出去，价钱会好。这是相辅相成的。
Sustainability is something everyone on the island agrees on, and they're working to ensure economic growth and environmental preservation can work hand in hand to make a better green island. Scott Huang, Peach Zhang, and Yvonne Yang for TaiwanPlus.
And we'd like to thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally, check out this drone display in Portsmouth, England, commemorating the 80th anniversary of D-Day. I'm Leslie Liao. Take care and see you next time.